And my fiancé and I start living together after our traditional marriage before the church marriage. And my fiancé and I start living together after our traditional marriage before the church marriage. That's a very good question. The short answer is no. You can't or you shouldn't. Now, the long answer is that if you agreed to have traditional marriage, legal marriage, church marriage, or wedding, and then you've only done 1/3 of the ceremonies both of you had agreed to do, then that means that you can't consummate yet. Consummation is the sexual engagement between the man and his wife after all the established protocols have been observed, starting from the traditional to the legal to the church. Everything you agreed to do, finish them, then you consummate. You don't roof a foundation. You don't roof a wall. You roof a completed building. So the roof is the consummation. The roof is the final piece, is the final topping. That is what sex is like. Sex is the consummation for a couple. And so if both of you agreed, unprovoked, uninduced, right? You're not under gunpoint. Nobody's coercing you to insist on doing church wedding. You planned to do a church wedding. You did counseling with a church. You've been going through all of these processes. Now you've done your legal, you've done your courts, which is legal, you've done your traditional, then you want to consummate before, because the only reason why you would want to start living together is to consummate. I mean, there's no need to deceive ourselves. You get into that house and you will begin to have sex before the church wedding. And that is inappropriate because you had agreed to satisfy all the conditions required for the marriage process before you can say you consummated or you can consummate. And that is why the whole idea of staying and living together, just having established or fulfilled one of the protocols, is not ideal. It doesn't even align with your conscience. That's why this is even a question in the first place. Nobody's going to be asking me, after establishing all the protocols for church, legal, and traditional, can I start living with my husband? Nobody's going to ask that. Why? Because your conscience does not come up as some violated part of you that is saying, should you be doing this? Should you be doing this? And so clearly, you're not comfortable with the idea. That's why this question even pops up in the first place. And I know there are people who say things like, come on, traditional is the most important one. That's fine. If you say traditional is the most important one, then stick with only traditional. You don't have to plan a church wedding into your wedding. Now, the traditional, each of these types of wedding by themselves can stand. Right? The legal can stand by itself. The traditional can stand by itself. The church can stand by itself. But if you've chosen to have those three, then fulfill all the conditions each of those institutions is requiring of you before you consummate. But don't choose those three, then satisfy one or two, and then start to consummate. So if you say it's only traditional you want, have only traditional wedding, have only legal wedding, and then start living together, and you will never have a church wedding. And that's fine if you have decided to do that. But also be willing to align with the protocols you have set at the foundational stage of your marriage. And that means, people say things like, the traditional is the most important. And that's fine. I'm not arguing with that. However, there is a need to submit yourself to the church authorities when it comes to organizing your marriage relationship. Because when it comes to counseling, it's the church that does that. When it comes to, counseling, even after the marriage, it's the church that does that. When it comes to adjudicating, mediating, between partners, between spouses, it's the pastor you will come to. So you didn't think the pastor was important at the point of making the decision, at the point of getting married, at the point of exchanging your vows, because, well, the church is just an appendage. It's a white man's religion. It's not so important. The traditional, then of course, go to some Go and Obatala by the time you have those issues in your marriages. Okay, I mean, let's be consistent. If you say the church is not important at the point of getting married, then don't let the church be important at all through the course of your marriage as well. So if you think it's important to need the church, having gotten married, then you should have already included that at the founding stage of your relationship. So my answer to that is not that it is a sin. It is that if you have agreed to undertake all these specific institutional wedding formats, then complete them before you consummate, because nobody does anything after roofing. Once you have consummated, it's the last thing. It is indicator of the fact that you have satisfied all conditions required to be legally, spiritually, and traditionally married. Then you can consummate. Okay, I hope this answers your question. Thank you very much.